Our local edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Get ready for some fun. He is back. Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, leading candidate for chairmanship of the California Democratic Party. That election's in 2017. Would like to speak about the presidential race. Who would have thunk California may matter? Or will it? Hillary Clinton did very well in New York, as did Donald Trump. Is California relevant on June 7th?
California is relevant for sure because it's California that's going to put somebody over the top, or at least within the final range of being there.
Let me ask you about that.
I think at the end of the day, it appears that Secretary Clinton is going to be very close, and with superdelegates will definitely be over the top. There's still some pushback going on about this, but I think that's the reality.
I want to talk about this notion of superdelegates because I learned recently virtually no Democratic candidate has won when there is a truly contested race without superdelegates after California. And yet the Sanders campaign is making all this noise about how she's not going to win with pledged delegates, but Mr. Obama didn't win with pledged delegates in 2008.
Yeah, so here's the reality. 15% of the total delegate pool are so-called superdelegates. Mm-hmm. So what are these superdelegates? They're the elected members of the Democratic National Committee. I'm not.
Okay.
They're the elected members of the Democratic National Committee. They are the members of Congress, the United States senators, and the governors. Those are the superdelegates. And they have their delegate slot by virtue of the office that they hold.
Sure.
And in reality, if you took them out of the pool, then grassroots people wouldn't be able to get into the pool because they'd get out organized by elected officials who have the capacity.
I see. I understand.
But I suspect there's always a discussion that says that they're in there to help smooth out the outcome. But here's the reality. It used to be 20% of the delegation.
Oh, really?
It was reduced after the Obama victory in 2008, from 20 to 15.
I want to ask about Democratic unity. The campaign had been flowing pretty nicely in terms of the Sanders-Clinton discussion. Seems that the discussion has soured a bit. We've heard the rhetoric get increasingly nasty. And my question for you is, assuming a Clinton nomination, is she able, look, it's a question we hear every 4 to 8 years, but I really want you to dig into this. Will she be able to unify the party? Will the young voters that have so overwhelmingly supported Mr. Sanders come home to Hillary Clinton?
To begin with, when you look at the contrast between either Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or John Kasich, these two worlds are entirely separate. And no thoughtful person that is a progressive, that is a Democrat, that is a liberal, would want to enable one of the others. It can be painful when your candidate who you've struggled to help elect, who you believe in, loses. It's painful.
But will Sanders be as arguably magnanimous as Mrs. Clinton was in 2008 after her really crushing defeat? I mean, no one expected Barack Obama to be the nominee. And if anyone could have gone home and just took all of her marbles, it could have been Hillary Clinton in 2008.
Well, she actually took the exact opposite tack. Once it was clear she couldn't win, she actually began campaigning in a positive way.
But Mr. Sanders doesn't seem to be doing that.
Well, you know, that will be most unfortunate if he doesn't, because ultimately the vision of the world that he espouses, the revolution that he hopes to have sparked in politics, will be destroyed by Donald Trump.
But in 2008, Democrats supporting Mrs. Clinton went to Mr. Obama. But they weren't young voters that can be flaky when it comes to elections. Will these young voters who have been so strong behind Mr. Sanders step up and vote in November?
I think most of them will. And look, there's been intensive polling that's been done on this. And it's important always to separate out the noise from the facts.
Fair.
It turns out that about 8% of voters who identify as being Sanders voters say they will not vote for Clinton. About 8%.
That doesn't seem high.
By the way, contrast that with 25% of Trump voters who say they will not vote for one of the other Republican candidates. So, and this is Gallup, this is major polling that's been done. I think at the end of the day, Secretary Clinton has as part of her message important school funding, college funding, important advances to health care, important advances to world peace, important advances to fighting the income inequality, which is driving so much of what's going on in America today.
I want to ask you, and we've done this before, but I think it's important because we have more data now about the electoral map. Let us presume that Mrs. Clinton is the nominee and Mr. Trump is the nominee for his party. Do we expect Mrs. Clinton to win traditionally Democratic states and Mr. Trump to win traditionally Republican states, and then we'll see those kind of swing states fall where they may? Or do we now see new swing states?
I think while there are a few states that you might call white working class states, we typically think of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, that could be in play. I think when you look at the South, Trump is not exactly popular in a lot of parts of the South.
Is Georgia in play?
So Georgia could be in play, especially if Republican votes are suppressed.
How would they be?
Because they don't turn out to vote. And if predominantly African Americans who are the Democrats in Georgia are excited and get out and vote.
What about Texas? We've heard about Texas going blue, some cycle in the future. Could this be the cycle?
If you have to look at Hillary Clinton riding a horse or Donald Trump riding a horse, my bet is that Hillary Clinton would ride that horse better.
What about states like, I don't know, Montana that has voted Democratic in the last generation, or Indiana, states that kind of every so often will jump to the Democratic side?
The thing that everybody misses in analyzing the Donald Trump numbers, because remember, we talked about this before, the polling numbers we usually hear are primary numbers.
Right.
When you look at the general election electorate, Donald Trump is wildly unpopular.
No, but Mrs. Clinton has she's upside down too.
But she beats him in every single poll.
She has. Let's talk about vice presidential nominees. Who knows? But if you were to pick your top 3 possible vice presidential nominees for the Democrats and for the Republicans, whom would you select? Not whom would Eric Bauman, the nominee, select. Whom do you think are likely frontrunners for their party's vice presidential nomination?
I would say one has to give strong consideration on the Democratic side to one of the Castro brothers.
Right.
To Tom Perez, the Secretary of Labor. And maybe to Governor O'Malley.
Really? What about someone like Al Franken or someone like Sherrod Brown, Elizabeth Warren, these very strong progressives that aren't Bernie Sanders?
Sherrod Brown is a possibility, I bet.
Al Franken, could you imagine Al Franken? I forget your politics. What a hoot that would be.
Al Franken, I'd have to stop watching SNL. And Elizabeth Warren has made a place for herself in the Senate. I don't think she wants to.
Republicans.
I think if it's Donald Trump, this is one of those times where they have to pick somebody who delivers a state. And I think John Kasich is running to be vice president. Now, whether or not he...
I know, would he be willing to line up with Mr. Trump?
That's a good question.
But it's so funny, you see these headlines, the sane ones running.
Maybe little Marco.
Marco Rubio.
Little Marco.
Would he help in Florida? He didn't help himself in Florida?
Yeah, no, he wouldn't.
What about Mr. Chris Christie, New Jersey governor?
He's running to be Secretary of Bridges.
That, of course, is referring to Bridgegate and the scandal that some say torpedoed his 2016 presidential campaign. On that note, we've been speaking with Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. He is a candidate for California Democratic Party chair. I'm Pomerance, Charter Local Edition.